I don't think the history of cryptography is going to be on the exam, but it is good knowledge for you to have in your job as an IT security leader, and it is symmetric encryption in its simplest form.
The Spartan sidetel is a message written lengthwise on a long thin piece of parchment wrapped around a stick. It sounds silly, but it's actually smart. I would have a stick of a certain size, I'd wrap the cloth around it, and then write my message down the stick. For each wrap of the cloth, I would add a new letter. If you unwrap it, it makes no sense. It's just a ton of jumbled letters. Even if someone else wraps around another stick, if they don't have the stick of the same diameter, it will still just be jumbled letters. So in this case, our encryption key would be, well, a stick. And the decryption key would be the same. I would send it off. Whoever the recipient would be would have a stick of the same size. They would wrap the parchment around it, and they can read the message. The Caesar cipher is a substitution cipher, which was, yes, used by Caesar. And it's done by switching plain text message a certain number of letters on the alphabet. If you look at the image on the right, you can see an E turns into a B, F into a C, D into an A. Again, it's incredibly easy to break now, but back then it was successful. The Vigenère cipher is a polyalphabetic cipher named after Blaise de Vigenère, 16th century French cryptographer. As you see over here on the right, the alphabet repeats 26 times in a square, which is called a Vigenère square. You write the plaintext on the x-axis and the key on the y-axis. If our plaintext is CISP and the key is store, and we look at the square over here, the third column is C, the first key letter is T, we follow the C column all the way down to the T, and here the first C letter from CISP turns into a V, then a P, then a G, then a J, then an I. Our plaintext is CISP, the key is store, and the ciphertext is VPGJI. It would be normal to use longer keys than just store, and obviously the plaintext also be longer, but this is the gist of it. This is how it works. A cipher disk is two concentric disks with alphabets on them. Concentric just mean round. If they're monoalphabetic or static, and just like we looked at before, T would always be D, but normally the inner disk would be turned a certain number of letters in one direction after so many uses. So every 3, 5, 10 letters, we might rotate one disk 3 places to the right. So before and during the Second World War, Germany used encoding machines called Enigma. For all the secure communication, they encoded the message, and then the recipient would decode it. You may have seen the movie The Imagination Game. I thought it was an awesome movie. If you haven't, go look at it. It's the story about how a British group of scientists, under the leadership of Alan Turing, broke the Enigma encryption. In all fairness, it was broken by multiple people, as well as the UK team, a US female scientist broke it as well. And there were 2 versions of the Enigma. Early on before the war, it had 3 rotors, and that was broken by the Polish military. When the Germans realized, they just added another rotor. And just by adding that one rotor, they made it exponentially harder to break. So when it had 3 rotors, the option could be 26 times 26 times 26, which gives just over 17,500 combinations. By just adding 1 rotor to that, it now has over 450,000 combinations. Can you see what I mean by exponentially harder? But the Enigma was eventually broken. And if you've seen the movie, you know that it kept it secret and only used the information for the critical targets. But breaking the Enigma was responsible for ending World War II years before it would have and saving millions of lives. Purple, that is the US name for the Japanese rotary-based encryption system from World War II as well. It's very similar to the Enigma and was broken both by the US, England and Russia. It had 3 rotors just like the Enigma did early on. When Russia broke the encryption and learned that Japan was not planning to attack Russia, they moved the majority of their eastern troops to Moscow to fight the Germans. They had decoded messages saying Japan was going for Southeast Asia. One-time pads are exactly what they sound like. They're pads that are only used once. Well, that at least only should be used once. It's a cryptographic algorithm where plaintext is combined with a random key, and it needs to be truly random. One-time pads too, because they never repeat, are also the only existing mathematically unbreakable encryption. While it is unbreakable, it's also very impractical. You can only use each pad once. Both the sender and receiver have to have identical pads. We have to ensure that the characters on the pad are truly random, and the pad should be kept secure. The Vernam cipher is the first known use of a one-time pad. It used bits where the bits were XORed with the plaintext bits. Let's look at an example where one-time pads were broken. Project Venona was a project between the US and the UK, started in 1943 trying to break Russian encryption, and it actually existed all the way up to 1980. The KGB used one-time pads, which as we know are unbreakable if they're not reused, for communicating with spies in the US. But for one reason or another, they reused the pads, which then enabled the US and the UK to decrypt their messages, and they can then identify a lot of high-level spies in the United States. We're only as secure as our implementation is. The Jefferson disk, or Berserker cylinder, is a cipher system using a set of discs or wheels, each with the 26 letters of the alphabet arranged around the edge. It was invented by US President Jefferson, and Battery has improved on it. For each disc, the letters have to be scrambled randomly, then all of the discs are marked with a unique number, and there's a hole in the center of each disc, allowing them to be assembled on an axle. So both the sender and the receiver would have an identical set of discs, both the number of the discs and the order of the letters. I would then encode my message on my cylinder, send you which order the discs need to be put in, and send you the encrypted text. Once you receive it, you rearrange your cylinders in the same order and decrypt the message. The original device Jefferson did had 36 discs. The US also used the Rotor machine during the Second World War and all the way into the 50s. It was very similar to the Enigma, but since they broke the Enigma, they also learned from its weaknesses. Where the Enigma had 3 or 4 rotors, depending on when we look at it, the Stickerbell had 15 rotors. Remember how many more options we got from just adding 1 rotor. So now we're looking at billions of combinations for each letter. As far as we know, there were no successful cryptanalysis against the machine during its lifetime of service. But then again, what do we know? On top of at the time being very secure, it was also very large, heavy, expensive, difficult to operate, fragile, and used a lot of complex machinery. And because of all of this, somewhere in the 50s, it was retired. In the 20th century, as encryption became more common and also much stronger, many countries moved towards classifying encryption in the same category that bombs and bullets were in, munitions, to ensure that the enemy at that time wouldn't be able to get their hands on our technology. So the Western countries, with the US in the lead, formed COCOM, or the Coordinated Committee of Multilateral Export Controls. The committee existed from 1947 to 1994. What they did was prevent the export of critical technologies from Western countries to countries behind the Iron Curtain during the Cold War. And for our piece of the pie, encryption is considered a critical technology. COCOM was dissolved in 1994 after the Iron Curtain came down and effectively ending the Cold War. In 1996, and still in fact today, the Wassenaar Agreement was made. The members are similar to the COCOM committee, but many of the foreign Iron Curtain countries are members of the Wassenaar Agreement. It limits the export of military goods and dual-use technologies, and cryptography is considered dual-use. Some of what the agreement does is limit the export from member countries to countries that are considered dangerous or countries who could use the technology against us. What it also does, though, is it allows some countries in the Wassenaar Agreement to prevent countries from exporting too strong encryption into their countries. If their citizens have access to strong encryption, it's much harder to spy on them. So the agreement is really used in 2 ways. Keep critical technology away from countries that could use it against it or countries we consider dangerous, as well as keep strong encryption away from citizens so they're easier to spy on.